Right. It's been a couple weeks since I've made a video, but I'm feeling ready now. The last few weeks I have been kind of all over the place emotionally and very busy here at the skate park, so I haven't made a video, but I'm here and I'm ready. And I'm 5 months on testosterone as of 3 days ago, and that is very exciting, and I'm still seeing pretty rapid changes personally, though they're somewhat more subtle to the outside world. They're very noticeable to me, and it's going to be the same stuff that I always talk about. A lot of his hair, there's so much hair growing so fast. Today I was looking at my arm and I noticed this super long black hair on my arm. Oh, there it is. Oh man, I don't know what it is, but the new hair is coming in darker than any of the hair that I've had, for years and years. I have a little flex on me because I was weed whacking before I made this video. So yeah, I'm getting a lot of hair. I'm starting to get chest hair. I got hair on my belly. I got hair on my thighs. I'm getting hair everywhere. Shaving more because the stubble on my chin and the peach fuzz everywhere else comes in really fast. I actually don't shave my mustache area very much because it just makes me so happy to see this little bit of a tiny mustache that's coming in. So I don't shave that as often as everything else because I like it and it makes me happy. And that's what matters in life. But I did want to talk about something else this week. I wanted to talk about how, for me, this transition is, in a way, not my first transition. It is my first gender transition and physical transition, but I feel like it's the third in a series of major shifts in my adult life. And I feel like because I've made these two other big shifts in my adult life, it's really making transition easier and clearer for me than it seems to be for a lot of other people, especially people younger than me. I'm in a few Facebook support groups for trans men, and a lot of them are younger, and a lot of them really struggle with a lot of stuff. And I see my younger self in there, and I imagine that if I had started transitioning, at 17, 18, 20, 25, I would be feeling similar. Or if I hadn't have gone through my other two big life transitions. So the first one was my faith transition. A lot of people go through a faith transition in their adult life at some point or another, either from believing one thing to believing something else, to not believing to finding some kind of faith, or from having faith to losing faith altogether. It's a somewhat common experience. For me, it was a very big experience because I had been deep in my evangelical faith for several years that I had gained in high school. Before that I had grown up Catholic, so there was this belief in God that I had, but it wasn't very strong or meaningful until I started going to an evangelical church in high school. At that point, I went deep, deep, deep because that is how I do things. I don't do things halfway. I do things 120%. That's how I do it. So I was all in very quickly, very committed, very passionate, learning everything I could, going to everything I could. And it really consumed my life for a long time. Even things that were long-term interests of mine, like skateboarding, kind of took a back seat to my faith because when you believe that you have to do this thing to go to heaven and to get everyone else in heaven, and when you believe this thing brings so much value to your life and to other people's lives, you're a fool if you're not working hard at it and not bringing other people in. If you're evangelical and you're not evangelizing, what are you even doing? So I took that extremely seriously until about 2007 or 8. And my faith transition did not happen all at once. It was a very slow process that lasted at least 5 years. It started while I was in Bible college in an evangelical Bible school, and I really started looking deeply at some faith issues, and they just didn't make sense anymore. They just didn't fit the way that I thought they did. And when you look at them from a surface level, oh yeah, it all makes sense. All of these very specific beliefs that were laid out in front of me. For me, it was specifically the Assembly of God flavor of beliefs. But once I started looking at them more closely and critically in an evangelical Bible college, they started unraveling. And that was really hard. It started with the end times and hell, and I had never really bought into the idea that LGBT people weren't going to heaven, but I was always very quiet about that because that was a thing that would ruffle some feathers, and I didn't care that deeply about because I didn't have a lot of people close to me who it affected. So nonetheless, things started unraveling, and it took years before I finally kind of came to an acceptance of a new place where I was, which was really, 2014 probably, by the time that I really accepted that I was no longer a Christian and that I didn't hold on to this faith anymore. There was a lot that happened in that time period that helped me to understand who I was and what I believed, and helped me to really accept myself as a non-Christian, because I clung with everything I could for years to hold on to little pieces of Christianity. But this I still believe in, but this, and one by one, they all slipped through my fingers until there really wasn't much left. So now I only use the word Christian to describe myself, in that I go to a mainline Christian church, a United Methodist church, which I love and I adore, and I love having some amount of spirituality in my life, but I really am a part of it because of my partner and because I've just grown to love the community so much, and they accept me when I challenge them on things, or when I say I don't believe things. They don't have a problem with it. They like engaging with those questions and those struggles and those doubts, and I love that. So that was the first transition, and that took years and was extremely difficult, and I wish there would have been a way for me to more easily work my way through that, because it left me with some mental health problems and other stuff that I had to work through as well. Second transition was directly after that, when I started receiving mental health care for the first time in my life, and started treating my anxiety disorder that was really intense at the time. When I first started seeing my therapist in 2015, I was a mess. I was having panic attacks where I could not function. I wasn't working. I was barely leaving the house. And working through that was great. I'm still working through it. It never ends. The work of mental health never ends. But now I run a business, and I function, and I have anxiety, and I deal with it. But through that process of working on myself was when I learned that I was autistic, which I just made a video on. So you can go back and watch that video. But that was another life shift for me that took a long time for me to accept that that was who I am. When I first was shown that possibility, I literally laughed it off. And then months later it came up again, and it just terrified me that could be me, which shows how ableist I was at the time. I'm still ableist. I'm still learning how to undo that. And just, if you don't know the term ableism is just like sexism or racism, that you see some people as less because of their ability level. So it's basically discrimination against people with disabilities. And just like racism, it is built into our culture. It is something everyone has to a degree that they have to recognize in themselves. And by not allowing myself to be autistic, that was being ableist, because I thought that there was something bad about that. I thought that was, I don't know. I just thought it was bad. So it took a long, long time for me to accept that was who I was. Even after I got the relief of the confirmation by a psychologist, it still was something I had to grapple with for a long time. What does this mean about me? What does this mean about how I was raised and how I function in the world? And does it mean that there's something wrong with me? And I really had to work through a lot of that, and that also took a long time. This was a multi-year process that there's times I'm still working on this. It's not something that's finished, but I've grown so much that I feel like I'm on the other side of the bulk of that transition. And that's the problem with words like transition, is that they talk like there's like this fixed period, like I'm transitioning in this period and there's a start and there's an end, and that's just not how transition works, even for people dealing with gender. Because I started socially transitioning almost as soon as I realized what was happening. So I will move on to that. So I dealt with the autism and accepting myself, and it almost seemed like as soon as that ended, now there was a new thing, and we're coming right up on a year of when I first had to really, really grapple with the fact that I was trans for the first time, where I just couldn't deny it anymore. And that was hard. That was really hard. And I feel like because I had gone through those other transitions of dealing with changing beliefs, accepting myself as autistic and figuring out what that means, and then coming to this gender crisis is what I call May of 2019 was my gender crisis. It was when I deconstructed my gender, for lack of a better term. I realized that I'm not a woman. And I didn't know what to do with that except to panic for about a month. I sent a couple of my trans friends like frantic messages, some of whom chatted with me for hours via text, and I thank them so much for all of their time, that they just listened and told me it would be okay, because in that moment I didn't believe it would be okay. But as the summer progressed, I realized that this is not going away. This is who I am, and the sooner I accept this, the happier I will be. Because I spent so long fighting against the faith transition, and I was so miserable. And then I spent so long fighting against the autism diagnosis, and I was so miserable that I didn't want to waste time fighting this. I wanted to just accept myself and love myself as quickly as I possibly could. And there is a minimum time, I feel like, that's going to be different for everyone, where you have to sit with this and just think about it and be in it for a while before you can be out and start working through this process of acceptance. But for me, I just wasn't going to mess around and wait. And I told this to my therapist at one point. I'm like, it might seem like I'm doing this fast, but I don't have time to waste. I have wasted too much time working through these other things in my life. I just want to live my life as the real, true me. And I can't do that while pretending to be the old version of myself. And it really came to a head at me when I was out with all of my friends, but I wasn't out at work here at the skate park. Everyone was still calling me Allison. Everyone was still calling me she. And inside I was just like, they don't see me. They don't know me. I'm living a double life and I'm lying to them. And it just felt awful. It felt awful to go out with my friends and be at home and be everywhere but here and to be AJ. And then to come to work and to be Allison. And I just couldn't live that any longer. And it was so scary to tell my employees and to tell my customers, this is who I am. I know you just met me as this other person, at least my customers. The park had only been open a few months, less than 6 months, or right about 6 months actually. I know you just met me, thousands of you, but you need to re-meet me as this person here. I need to introduce myself again to you. And that was the scariest thing I've ever done. Amazingly, I have received very little backlash and very little nastiness because of that. And I think it's because of how I built the community. Because I built the community so strongly on, just protecting the marginalized groups. I made a space for marginalized groups in action sports. I hung up a trans flag before I had my own gender crisis. It was here because I wanted people to walk in the door and know this is what we are about. We are about protecting and taking care of people who don't feel safe in other spaces. They're gonna feel safe here, and I'm not gonna accept sexism or homophobia or transphobia or ableism. That is not okay in this space here or in any of my digital spaces for Stronger Skate Park. I delete and I block people if they do that. No warning, it's just done, it's just gone. I don't have time for it. And doing that early really cut out a lot of the assholes. So I feel like because I was doing that work for other people, I was setting myself up a place to be accepted. So even though it's coming up on a year since I kind of came out to myself, or as they say in trans circles, since my egg cracked. Once an egg cracks, you can't put it back in. So once you realize who you are, you can't undo it when you're trans. Once you realize you're trans, there's no undoing it. If you're actually trans, which it's very, I think everyone should question their gender at some point or another, really critically think about it. And I think most people will come out being like, yeah, I am the gender that I was assigned at birth, and I'm comfortable as that. But I think some people go, oh, shoot, I'm not. And you can't undo that when it gets to that point. So even though that was less than a year ago for me, I feel like I've really significantly transitioned in that time. Even though I still have a long way to go physically, I have a surgery coming up. I've only been on hormones for 5 months, and it takes years to see the full effects. And of course, just like anyone else, you continue changing throughout your life, which is why transition never has a set end point. Because you're going to keep changing your whole life and growing just as cis people do. A cis man doesn't look the same at 30 as he does at 50. So there's always going to be change that keeps on coming. But I just didn't want to waste any time. I've wasted a lot of time in my faith transition and coming to understand myself as autistic. My autism transition, if you will. And I didn't have time to waste this time. I just have to be me, and I have to be healthy, and I have to be happy, because that is the only way to live. It's the only good way to live. And so those are my thoughts this week. Thank you for listening to my rambles. I really hope that this helps somebody. If these videos help one, trans person out there, then I've done enough, and I'm so happy that you're finding something through this. Thank you all. Peace.